members to this morning's GLA Oversight Committee meeting and officers and members of the public who are so keen they're watching from home today, I'm sure. Can I remind everyone to put their phones on silent or off, and if it is silent rather than vibrate, because the microphones can pick that noise up. Can I ask Davina, our clerk, to confirm whether we've got any apologies for absence today, please?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence have been received from Assembly Member Deval.
Lovely, thank you very much. Let's move to item 2, declarations of interest. Can we note the offices held, and have members got any other interest to declare? Assembly Member McCartney.
Yes, can I declare a non-pecuniary interest in item 9? It's an item regarding the Education and Youth Team restructure, which is this team that supports me as Deputy Mayor. So I will stay in the room but not take part.
Lovely, thank you very much. And Assembly Member Fortune.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a non-pecuniary interest in agenda item 10 as a trustee of the London Youth Games who work with the sport team here.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Can we note those? Minutes of the meeting. Can we confirm the minutes of the meetings of the GLA Oversight Committee held on the 16th of June and the 7th of July 2021 to be signed by me as a correct record? Agreed. Lovely, thank you. Summary list of actions. Firstly, can I invite Mary Hartley here, Chief Officer of the GLA, to provide a verbal update on actions arising from the meeting held on this committee in June, 16th of June.
So this is related to the proposals around the HR shared service.
Right, so you're just going to update us today.
Yes, so I found myself presenting the proposals to you in headline terms last meeting, while just a couple of days before the government's funding deal for TfL, latest funding deal for TfL, had been published, and we needed to just pause and see whether or not the proposals could stay as I presented to you, or whether we needed to modify them given other burdens on TfL. So where we have got to is we do propose to go ahead with some aspects of the shared service, but not the entirety of the proposal I put to you. And to do that for September 22, not April 22. And there are a number of reasons for that, but my proposal, Chair, is to come back on the 14th of September meeting with a sort of recast of the proposal and picking up then a lot of questions that you asked me last time in terms of costs and benefits and timing. So that's my proposal.
Okay, so you'll come back 14th of September with a clear paper and we can see the way forward on that item. Okay. Can we note the ongoing completed and closed actions arising from previous meetings of the Oversight Committee? Noted. Thank you very much. Wow, our next item is our sort of main item other than our staff restructures and so on to look at, which is our first of a series of Q&As with the mayoral appointees. And so I'm delighted to welcome today the Mayor's Chief of Staff, David Bellamy, and the Mayor's Deputy Chief of Staff, Richard Watts, to look today at their respective roles and responsibilities. So welcome to our meeting today. I'm going to kick off with the first question, and I'm going to start with David, if that's okay. Could you tell us, David, looking at roles and responsibilities, what do you think have been your key achievements in your time as the Mayor's Chief of Staff, and what have been the main challenges in your role?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning. In terms of achievements, I think it's wrong to think about these things separately, because it's not about my achievements or Richard's achievements or other members of the team achievements. We're all here to serve the Mayor, and so what we do is we contribute to the work of the Mayor, and so achievements are necessarily those of the Mayor, which obviously the committee will all understandably have views upon. In terms of challenges, I guess I would say that it has just been an incredibly challenging period. I think, really thinking about the last 16 months and what, we've all been through, I guess, in our respective working lives. And, I think there has been a volume of work that always was, frankly, too high, and at times has just has reached levels of unsustainability, and I think that would be the particular biggest challenge that we've faced as the managing the pandemic, and just come from a meeting about that to dealing with the consequences of it, which have of course been incredibly significant financially and in other senses, and then all that on top of what was a very busy business as usual in any case. And so I think that's probably what I would pick out as the biggest challenge.
Just kind of events really on top
Dear
of
boy.
on top of the workload. Okay. And what do you expect this new role you've created? You've talked before when we discussed a restructure about the pressures on the office and so on. What do you expect the new role of Deputy Chief of Staff to add to the GLA beyond what you managed to deliver in the last mayoral term?
So it's very much about a recalibration of senior capacity. So if you think about the structure in the first term, where we didn't have a Deputy Chief of Staff, but we had a Mayoral Director of Policy, what that model provided for was essentially me as Chief of Staff doing the line management of all the mayoral advisors, and then the Mayoral Director of Policy working with all the mayoral advisors to obviously coordinate and work together on policy matters. And that it largely worked, but it wasn't a perfect model. There probably is no perfect model, and one of the challenges with it was that I had 17 reports, and on top of everything else that I was doing, it wasn't possible to be doing the sort of line management and relationships that I certainly would aspire to. Just simply there wasn't the capacity. And so hopefully what the new structure does, and I'm happy to move on a little to specifics if that would be helpful, Chair, is share out the line management side of things a bit more tightly in terms of the areas of focus that Richard and I have. And it also means that where perhaps if you take transport, sometimes you would end up with the Deputy Mayor, myself and the Mayoral Director for Policy all involved in an issue, and it's always good to have more than one view on things, but you probably didn't need three, and so it will just provide a little bit more efficiency in things like that.
Also make your role more interesting in the sense that you're not having to do all the line management that's shared, and you can really focus on, as it were, half the policy areas.
I think the Mayoral Director of Policy role was an incredibly challenging role, because the canvas of London is obviously so broad, and trying to be across it on behalf of the Mayor and just have oversight of everything was in itself very, very challenging. And so yes, while the world doesn't fall down into neat silos so that Richard and I can say, well, you do that, I'll do this, and never the twain shall meet, nevertheless I think broad structures and ways of working can make all that a bit easier.
So, can you set out for us what your personal objectives are for this term of office?
Well, my personal objective is just very straightforward. Is to deliver for the Mayor to be a success in terms of delivery of his manifesto and the things he wants to achieve. And it's just it's my role just to support that in any way I can.
Okay, so your objectives are based just around delivering the Mayor's commitments. Have you got any wider sort of objectives you've set yourself for the GLA, or your thoughts on that you would want to see, or the GLA group? Well,
I mean, so there's a couple of things there, aren't there? Obviously, firstly, I have personal thoughts. We all have personal thoughts. I'm an officer of the authority, and so I leave my personal thoughts at home. Excluding the workroom from at home I work from most of the time now. obviously there are things that we want to see, the Mayor wants to see in terms of, improvements in the way the group works and so on and so forth, but, that's very much about what the Mayor wants to see and me, my role helping the Mayor deliver what he wants rather than things that would be kind of personal objectives.
Okay, and then finally from me, at the end of this mayoral term, it's only 3 years, as we know, what do you feel you need to achieve in order that your work, as it were, could be considered a success by both the Mayor but also this committee?
I think it's very subjective, and I think in terms of the committee, all of you obviously come from different backgrounds and different perspectives, and will have as Londoners will in general, different views about what success looks like. I think the one thing that I guess was a learning from term one, and we've already alluded to it in the earlier questions, is events. And when the Mayor was elected in May 2016, I don't think we could have expected potentially Brexit, but then particularly the way Brexit played out, the various terror attacks, Grenfell, which obviously continues to have a huge impact on our work, various other incidents, and obviously then COVID, I don't think obviously any of us expected. And so it's very hard with that knowledge to say, okay, right, in 3 years this is what success looks like, because we're never in a fixed landscape. London's a hugely dynamic city, and everything changes and circumstances change all the time. And there will always be things that you look at and say, well, right, there's more to do there. That's just the nature of human life, I think.
Thank you for that. I'll move on to Assembly Member Hall.
Yes, I'm going to ask questions of Richard, if I may, in a minute. But I do have to say, David, I find it such a shame that you can't mention key achievements, if only for yourself, to get up and work, and we all accept you work really hard, and not to think, well, I did that really well, or I'm so glad I've changed that and this has been the answer. Because you do work hard, there's no doubt about that, but to not be able to indicate to us what you think are your key achievements, I think is quite sad, really, for you, beyond everybody else, because all of us get up in the morning and want to do something great, even if it's small, because then we have a sense of achievement.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that, Assembly Member. I think I'd just say two things. Firstly, I don't, it's not a matter I'm sat here saying, I don't achieve anything. I think it's a matter of saying, I work for the Mayor, and the Mayor achieves things, and I wouldn't want to sit here in a public forum and say, I did this, I did that, because the success and the failure, properly attributes to the Mayor. And the second point I would make, and I feel this quite strongly actually, is I could sit here and say, well, right, I did that, and there'd be some truth in it, but in the mayoralty, there isn't a case where you can just say, oh right, it's a one-person effort. It's a huge effort in terms of colleagues in the Mayor's office, officers in the GLA, officers in the functional bodies, and so absolutely, I'm sure I'd say, well, right, my intervention, my question, my suggestion, move something on a different path. But I really wouldn't want to sit here and wouldn't be comfortable in a public forum trying to, take credit for things, because basically anything that's achieved is a team effort.
I hear what you say, but I hope in the watches of the night you think that you've achieved something, because if not, you're putting a hell of a lot of work into something that you're not taking any credit for. But I'll leave it at that, and to you, Richard, if I can. So can you outline your main duties in the post, and how do they differ from the Chief of Staff? And can a job description of your role be shared with this committee so that we're absolutely clear on the separate lines between you?
Morning. I'm sure on the last one the answer is yes, when these things are all finalised as part of the Mayor's office restructure.
We'll publish it on our web pages.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the overall objectives of my job are broadly very similar to the ones of David's. The difference between us is the areas of responsibility for kind of policy and development work that we take, whereas my responsibilities are primarily around the responsibilities of the GLA as a body, particularly around kind of the economic, social and environmental progress of London, and David's primarily around the functional bodies. After that, it's a case of kind of an awful lot of work comes into the office and we try and divvy it up between ourselves. And I think the thing that is useful is effectively the extra capacity around bandwidth and the bandwidth around better support for management, support for deputy mayors. And I think we are making good progress on how we work together in a new working relationship to effectively come up with ways in which we can use the extra capacity that this job that I've been appointed to creates in order to make sure that the Mayor's Office is running to the best of its ability.
Right. I'm almost nervous of asking you this because as a new member of the Mayor's team, what are your aims and ambitions for this role?
Well, I'm going to refer you to a degree to David's answer. And the reason for that is I'm really struck actually by, in coming into the Mayor, I'll be really honest, I'm really struck when coming into the Mayor's office how tight a ship it is and what a collegiate operation it is. And ultimately, I don't want to give any sense at all that there are mayoral advisors running around with personal agendas and with personal things to achieve, because that's not how it works. We work to the Mayor. I've given up having a democratic mandate when I stood down from my previous role. I don't have a personal democratic mandate. I work to the Mayor who has the mandate, and ultimately it's the Mayor to just set the things that we should achieve, not for us to have our own personal ambitions in the job. If I wanted personal ambitions, I'd have stayed at my last job.
And I hear what you say. I think you've retained the political sense and with a lot of words and no substance there, really. What particular skills and knowledge will you use from your previous professional experience in your new role?
Okay, so I think I bring two or three things to this job. I think number one, I bring a set of networks from having been a borough leader for almost 8 years and quite a senior cabinet member in London and then in roles across the LGA. So I think I bring a lot of networks to this. I think I bring a really good understanding about how the GLA and the boroughs can work together constructively. I think I bring good understanding about how you run a public body, particularly from a mayor's office or a kind of senior elected office, and how we can work constructively between the mayor's office and Mary's professional officer corps in order to make sure the mayor's priorities are fully implemented. I think they were the key things I was appointed to do.
Okay, if you've got a good understanding of how you run a public body, you'll know that these public bodies need to be held to account. So what are your key objectives during this term of office, and how should this committee hold you to account?
Well, again, I do come back to the answer, which is my key objectives are to support the Mayor. I mean, I've one objective, and that's to support the Mayor. The Mayor is the democratically accountable person. I merely work to him. I have no power. I merely have influence through my appointment by the Mayor. And I think the committee can hold me to account by me always being very happy, as I think this is my second appearance in my 2 months here, and I'm very happy to come to see you whenever you want. But ultimately, my accountability to the people of London runs solely through the Mayor, who's the democratically elected post holder.
But we need to be able to hold you to account, and at the moment it's just we're all around the Mayor, and the Mayor is, so if we look at the manifesto then, if we look at the Mayor's manifesto, which one of you is principally in charge of delivering that, if we have to concentrate just on the Mayor and what he does?
So, yeah, in terms of the manifesto, clearly commitments fall into different areas, and there'll be, I guess, a mayoral advisor who will be the lead advisor for each of them. And then that comes back to the point that Richard was making earlier, where those things that fall within the GLA's general powers in terms of economic development, social development and environmental improvement, are things that Richard would lead on working with the relevant deputy mayor or other advisor. And those things that are more functional body related, or are things that would fall into, I guess the more kind of corporate end of things would fall into my remit. Obviously there are touch points there. As we said, London doesn't neatly fall down into categories, and that's obviously why we need to work together on this, and ultimately support delivery, so that ultimately the mayor can be held accountable rightly for the delivery of all those things.
So what conversations have been had with the deputy mayors on their priorities for this term? Do you have discussions with them?
And we have a regular set of priorities which largely revolve around implementing the manifesto. But also I think the Mayor has pretty publicly set out his top 5 priorities, and the conversations are largely around what the Deputy Mayor can support to do to deliver those top priorities. And they are getting London back on its feet. So the recovery programme, and obviously I chair the London recovery task force that sits under the recovery board chaired by the Mayor and the chair of London councils, is number 2, keeping London safe. Number 3, the Green New Deal, which covers climate emergency, air quality, and a lot of the Mayor's environmental agenda. Number 4, it's affordable housing and physical delivery. And number 5, it's a new deal for young people and what we can do to particularly to support young people who've been so badly hit by the crisis. And the conversations we have, given every single deputy mayor's role hits one of those five top priorities to a degree, is how we can coordinate our efforts to make sure those 5 cross-cutting priorities are driven forward over the next 3 years.
Okay, so his second promise then, keeping London safe. How are you? You've got MOPAC, haven't you?
David has MOPAC.
You've got Libby Peck.
Well, the VRU formally sits in MOPAC, but we work together on some of those issues.
Well, which one of you then? Because
in the line management sense, in the line management sense, both Sophie Linden as Deputy Mayor and Lib Peck as Director of the VRU are employees of MOPAC, which obviously is a distinct organisation reporting up to the Mayor. In terms of how it works in practice, then I would lead on working with Sophie in terms of policing and crime issues, and Richard would lead on working with Lib, also Sophie where relevant, on the wider preventative agenda.
It's a little bit split then, that particular.
Yeah, and it's one of those points where the world doesn't fall down into neat silos.
Which is why we're trying to make sense of some of this, because that did sit in between you. I think the thing is, we want to know who to talk to when his second pledge, keeping Londoners safe, when that goes or is going horribly wrong, who we come to get some assurance that things are working behind the scenes in order that the Mayor can produce what you want him to. So it's a bit of both, really. Looks like it, doesn't it?
On this, but also, as you know, Sophie Linden is regularly before this committee, as I think Lib Peck is as well. So, it is a top priority for the Mayor. I'm not sure I accept the premise of your question, although clearly some of the recent teen homicides have been horrific. But it's clearly a thing we spend a lot of time working on upstairs.
Yes. What do you think that Londoners should expect to be delivered this time next year? So if we're sitting in this meeting in a year's time, what do you think they can expect? If you want to home in on those 5 priorities, will there be thousands more homes? Will people be much safer?
Shall I have a go at it?
Go on, I'll chip in.
I think the honest answer to that is it really depends how the pandemic plays out. Because we are in the middle of a 3rd wave now. Case rates are expanding rapidly. There is already conversations about another lockdown, which has a profound impact on the delivery of policy. And we are not out of, by far, the biggest of the very difficult big events that David has described the city being governed by over the last 5 years. And it would be ludicrous, frankly, to say that the delivery plans we have as a body will not be affected by the way the pandemic plays out over the next 12 months. And so, to a degree, we are in a uniquely difficult position to answer that question directly. However, clearly, what we want to see is we are going to publish some quarter one performance figures when the deadline for that hits, and we're trying to get performance figures that are both substantive and meaningful and actually tell us something about the work of the organisation. And so we are going to see a range of kind of measures rolled out that the Mayor set out in his manifesto. But I think a good faith answer to the question is that let's see how the state of the pandemic in the autumn, and then we may be in a better position to actually judge what we can deliver. The idea that, for example, numbers of new homes isn't going to be judged by levels of social isolating on business,
but we're trying to find some answers, and we, as very often is the case, there aren't any.
I guess if I was picking out a couple of particular things from those priority areas, clearly in terms of affordable housing, there is 2 years left on the target, the 116,000 that the government would set. So, across the next year, clearly we want to see significant progress to that. We know it's a target that was set without thinking about, obviously a pandemic or COVID or the building safety crisis we face. But, absolutely that will be a key thing to look at. On the safety front, key thing to see will be the recruitment of police officers in terms of the second year of additional funding for officers we secured from the government, and seeing that, and then obviously confirmation from the government about how many officers the Met will be allocated for the third year. And also, we'll be shortly consulting on the police and crime plan for the next 3 years, which obviously will set out a lot more detail of the agenda in those areas. And then, I think the other thing to particularly pick out would be on the environmental side, and obviously the extension of the ultra-low emission zone in October, which clearly will be a very significant change given it's 18 times the size of the one that's already in operation. And so that will probably be the single biggest thing I think Londoners will see in the next year.
Okay, when are we going to, just briefly, when are we going to get those figures you've just mentioned?
Was it quarter one performance?
Yeah.
There's a timetable that's been set up.
So the Q1 performance reports are due on the 18th of August. It's 35 working days after the end of quarter.
Okay, and when you publish Richard's job description, could you also make sure that the job descriptions of deputy mayors, mayoral directors, etc., if they've changed what they're doing, if you've changed anything around, that they go out so we can look at those?
Yeah, it's certainly my intention to get them all published, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Assemblymember Fortune and Assemblymember Best.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just very, very quickly, it's probably a question for both of you. Richard, I was struck by the fact that you said that one of the things you'll be doing is increasing bandwidth in the office, which I can understand. But does that suggest then that there were capacity issues previously? And if that's the case, how has that impacted on the key deliverables over the last 5 years, reducing crime, delivering housing, etc.?
I'm probably not the best place to talk about the previous 5 years because I wasn't here, so I might refer that one to David.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So as I said, particularly since the pandemic began, it clearly workloads have been intense. Even before then, I don't have the figures in front of me, but the staff survey that was done at the end of 2019 showed a very high proportion of people in the Mayor's office, clearly higher than any other directorate in the organisation, saying they had to work significant extra hours to get their jobs done. I think it's fair saying that colleagues do that willingly, and say publicly, I'm very grateful for them for their commitment. It is obviously it's a privilege for all of us to work in the Mayor's office and do what we do, and that reflects in colleagues' behaviour and their it's obviously the case that if you have more time, you can do more things, and so there are certainly things that I would like to get into and look at more, that just not being able to do that. And it's also specifically the case in my job that when we run through the budget cycle, so really for me from some point in November through to into March, my life's incredibly busy with that, as members will know, the constant set of stages that we go through in the budget process, and rightly all the scrutiny that there is about it, both publicly and privately, is a very significant time commitment. So I tend to find I have more time to be proactive about things and pick up some of the low priority work in the summer months, and that's how things tend to flow.
I think the other thing I would add is what the extra bandwidth creates is more opportunity for the Mayor's office to talk to key partners and stakeholders, and particularly I think one of the things I'm genuinely really struck by is the way in which COVID has changed the working relationship between the different entities of governance in London. I think the Recovery Board, in getting together the Mayor, the boroughs, the business community, voluntary sector and a whole range of other key stakeholders, has actually led to quite a big cultural change. And I observed this in my previous job and in this one, it's led to quite a big cultural change about the way the different institutions of London government work together. And I think the extra bandwidth has allowed us to really accelerate some of that cultural change, meaning allowing stronger liaison at the Mayor's instruction between the Mayor's office and other partners out there. So, for example, we've got a lot of, we made a lot of progress through the Recovery Board in the last few months with the creation of the extra capacity in the Mayor's office. And things like the economic framework and the Pan London Statement on Levelling Up that the board agreed just yesterday are bits of work that I think are real products of the better working relationships we've seen in the last year across the different institutions, and all of it cross-party, I would say.
So just to summarise, because of time, there's extra bandwidth, which is going to help you do new stuff as a result of COVID, events, as we referred to earlier. But actually there were some capacity issues previously, and people were, as you note, working really hard, but there were pressures on staff hitting some of those key deliverables over the past 5 years.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, in terms of extra capacity, it's about trying to be as efficient as we can be, because of course the Mayor's office headcount hasn't changed. And also, of course, in terms of delivery, it's important to remember that the Mayor's office role is very much, one of coordination and steers. The actual delivery is led by our officers in the particular areas, whether that's Mary's team of executive directors or whether it's leadership in functional bodies. And so, it's worth just being clear about what the role of the Mayor's office is there. It's not for us to get down and dirty into the actual nuts and bolts of the delivery.
I'll leave it down and dirty nuts and bolts.
So remember best.
I was a little concerned when we were listening to those answers there from both of you, really. It kind of took me back to being in a performance review if I was at my old company and they were asking me, what have you achieved in the last 12 months? And I was saying, well, it's really what the company's achieved. And then they were saying, what do you hope to achieve in the next 12 months? And I said, well, it's really what the company wants to achieve. I mean, I'd get laughed out the door. They wouldn't enjoy that. And the Mayor is much like the company in this. You still both have key achievements and key roles within that. So actually, Richard, you came towards answering that question a little more clearly towards the end, which is there is those 5 key strategic aims of the Mayor under recovery: keeping London safe, the Green New Deal, affordable housing, and opportunities for young people. So when you're asked that question, I would really hope we get answers within those sections saying, in terms of keeping London safe, what does that look like? In terms of, the Green New Deal, what does that look like? And I think my question is particularly to you, Richard, coming from the outside, you must see things that you could improve. That's clearly why I would hope that you've taken the job and want to come here, because you've seen things that have happened and you want to improve areas in aims that line up with the Mayor's thinking. You probably share those aims and you want to achieve. So under those 5 key headings, what does success look like?
Under the 5 key headings, I think definitions of success actually are pretty clear. I think the thing that we haven't wanted to get very much into is giving any sense at all that we have specific personal views on what success looks like beyond the mayor's, because we don't. I think so what success looks like in all of these things, I think David has clearly defined. I think there was some clear there on recovery. We're working through there are 9 recovery missions around both economic and social recovery at the moment. Each of them are setting out success criteria. There's a whole range, there's an enormous amount of work both from the GLA, from the wider GLA group and boroughs and others to deliver those missions. And I could probably spend the rest of this session going on about the specific outcomes across all 9, but ultimately, and but I'm pretty confident you've seen it already, and if not, we can work on getting something about what the outcomes from those 9 missions are. On keeping London safe, as David said, the key metric we're looking at the moment is what we can do to recruit police officers in the current issues, and clearly working through how we can best support the Met in very, very pressing circumstances when resources are incredibly stretched. There is the outcome of the ULEZ extension on Green New Deal, which is fundamental, and the Mayor's talked ambitiously about the retrofit programme. We've made big announcements about that already, including that's a piece of work that we are carrying out at the moment. On affordable housing, we have the housing plan, and there are the targets the Mayor has set out, and on the New Deal for young people, again, the most of that is delivered through the mission that set out really ambitious plans for mentoring programs and support for young people in need of a bit of extra help and support all the way through coming out of this pandemic. So I think the policy agenda is in those 5 areas is really clear.
So I just would come back to, I think that's the targets and I like to say the success criteria, and so hopefully the next time that we see, I don't know, obviously I'm new to the Assembly, I hope that when we're trying to scrutinise, we get actually something that we can scrutinise, because it's very hard to scrutinise ideas. I mean, David, you mentioned success being subjective. Well, the idea of scrutiny is we at least need to try and, scrutinise numbers and key objectives to get some sort of consensus, or, whereas at the moment I think it's very hard to do that.
Yes, but is my response to that. And I think this is quite important. It's certainly a thing I feel very strongly from my previous job. So you're absolutely right that there's got to be some key outputs and outcomes that we monitor all the way through this, and the performance figures should do all of that. But we also, Schrödinger's cat. You cannot observe something without changing it, and we all know, for example, in fact, I remember the 2010 government sweeping away a whole load of performance targets that a previous Labour government put in because it thought they were distorting public service delivery. And I think you have to be smart in the way you design targets to make sure that they are both telling you something and that the delivery of them is not distorting programmes, which is often the mistake that are made with key KPIs. And I feel quite strongly that if you don't design targets that are smart, actually they are not in the best interests of service users.
I agree. I'd like to see those smart targets. So thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's move on to our next. Oh, sorry, I had to look round. I hadn't seen you. Sorry, Assembly Member Dr. Sahota.
Thank you. I've been listening here, and of course, the real key job here for you, David Richard, is to deliver the Mayor's agenda. The Mayor has gone to the electorate, has a manifesto on which he has been elected, and that's what you're going to be delivering on. Richard, you were once a leader of a council. How do you contrast that job as a leader of a council as to the job you're doing now?
But the fundamental difference is, there's 2 big fundamental differences, which is I'm not in charge anymore, which is quite a big difference, and but actually fundamentally, and that goes back to the point, I don't have a democratic mandate. The Mayor has a democratic mandate, and I merely serve the Mayor at his pleasure. And so the GLA, but I've been struck actually in coming into this job how different the GLA is from a borough council, more so than I anticipated, if I'm honest. And actually how small the core budget of the GLA is in compared to borough councils as well. And I think so it is a very different style of organisation to a borough. And I think some of the understand. Yeah, I think some of the kind of breakthroughs we've had in the last 18 months of working together so intensively between the boroughs and the GLA have helped to kind of demystify from both ends the kind of cultural differences that there are between the two. And I do think, that we have seen enormous progress actually in between all of the boroughs. It's certainly not a party political point. And working relationships with the GLA being significantly improved because there is that better understanding of actually the very different ways in which the organisations work.
And I think the key question is that you're not the leader here. The leader is the mayor. And that the Assembly should be holding the mayor to account,
Right.
and not holding you to account for the actions of the mayor. Thank you.
It's about delivery, isn't it? We're trying to work out the delivery. This is a new area of scrutiny for us, trying to scrutinise the mayoral advisers. I know Assemblyman Duval was very keen we started to look at that. Let's move on to interaction and working relationship between the London Assembly and the Mayor's Office. Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you. And my questions are for David. So David, during your time in this role, how would you describe the working relationship between the London Assembly and the Mayor? Do you feel this has changed in any way over the years, and if so, how?
It's very hard to put my finger on this. I think clearly we've been through a 16 months, an unprecedented period where all sorts of things have necessarily been different. And how do you get the kind of, what are the kind of underlying things and what are things that are just temporary and related to COVID? I think, one of the things that always strikes me is, so as an authority, in terms of elected members, it's the Mayor and the Assembly, and that implies, when you think of it like that, some sort of kind of equivalence in perspectives and kind of internally facing each other in a way that I don't think actually is quite a reciprocal relationship, because I think the Assembly, clearly a key part of your role, rightly, is to scrutinise the Mayor. And from the Mayor's perspective, the Mayor obviously is focused on delivery and focused on the kind of governance of yes, the GLA, but all the functional bodies and his kind of wider convening responsibilities. So it's hard sometimes to kind of say exactly what the relationship should be and where the points are. I think what's certainly important, and I say this and I feel this strongly as an officer, is that we try and support the Assembly in its scrutiny role, and we do, as the Mayor does, believe in the value of good scrutiny. One of the things I think that we haven't necessarily succeeded at is helping the Assembly to get upstream enough, and yes, there's obviously value, and I'm not in any way trying to take away from a kind of post-decision scrutiny, but I think there's possibly a role that the Assembly hasn't got right, and if I'm frank, possibly has got worse at over the last few years in terms of kind of being upstream and taking a more strategic view and looking at things. Does that kind of help? I find it a difficult thing to
it raises an awful lot of questions. So you're saying that the Assembly doesn't get upstream enough and we don't take a strategic enough view. I was asking you about our working relationship. So do you think there's something that you need to be doing differently to help us get upstream enough so that we can take that more strategic view?
So I think it's something that I'm happy to help with. As I say, I do want to support the Assembly. We do all believe in the value of good scrutiny. I think again it comes back to earlier points about time, and I think being realistic. I think we need better relations at a senior officer level. Of course, you're recruiting a new executive director, and I'm sure other changes will flow from that. And officers, obviously, Rich and I report to the Mayor, but pretty much everybody else reports to Mary, who's here to serve all of us. And I think there have been, while we've got to respect the priorities, I think there's been a level of silo at times between officers in the different areas, which possibly hasn't enabled the best upstream scrutiny.
I mean, I'm thinking of a couple of examples from this last year. For instance, the move to the Crystal and also the budget process, both of which have been processes that might fit in that category where you think maybe we've not been upstream enough, but actually where there could have been different processes in terms of the way of that working relationship between the Mayor's office and the Assembly. Do you think there's anything in those two examples that could have been done differently?
So, I mean, in terms of the move to the Crystal, so I think to digress a little, when in April 2016, one of the things I was doing was obviously seeing the opinion polls and knowing that the complacency but was likely to be elected mayor, I was working with the then head of paid service in terms of transition arrangements. And one of the things that I asked him for was a floor plan of the Mayor's office floor here, because one of the things I knew was that it's just how controversial like little housekeeping things like seating plans and arrangements can be. And, so clearly the whole context then of the building and the location of City Hall just is that on steroids, isn't it? And I think the process was right in terms of speaking to leading Assembly members privately ahead of a consultation, and it's obviously right and proper that the consultation with the Assembly took place as it did with staff. I know that there was a lot of engagement in that period. This committee, I know, questioned Mary on the detail of the proposal on multiple occasions. The Mayor appeared before it. There was a great deal of correspondence, meetings with Assembly members and so forth. We extended the consultation period at the request of the Chair of the Assembly. So I think there's a lot of engagement. I think it's just ultimately clouded by the fact that people, like I say, as with stuff around seating plans, it becomes a kind of personal thing to people, and that really just does impact people's perceptions on it.
Sorry, you're saying that the scrutiny of the move to the Crystal was clouded by personal perceptions?
In one sense, obviously it is, because everything we do as humans, and we scrutinise is impacted by your personal perceptions. What I'm saying is that perceptions of the consultation process, looking back, are inevitably crowded by people's views about the outcome of it.
Well, perhaps this may be somewhere, if you're thinking about aims and what you might see as success, actually thinking about how to make that relationship work better might be something that I'd actually, while I was listening to those first questions from Assembly members, I wasn't thinking of you claiming credit for achievements of the Mayor, but actually having a decent working relationship with this scrutiny body would be something potentially to put in that list of aims and things that could be viewed as a success. And but anyway, perhaps I should move on to the next question, which is, what would you like to change about the way the London Assembly and the Mayor's office work together?
Okay. So can I just come back? I want to come back on your first point, because Assembly Member Best raised it earlier as well, and it deserves a response for clarity's sake. So as I said, I very much value the relationship with Assembly members. I very much want to help you do your jobs. We're in a programme at the moment. Obviously, I will know members of the Labour group better than members of other groups, and that's why we're in a programme of going around and meeting members of Richard and I, members of other groups. Met the Liberal Democrat group last week, I think meeting the Green group this afternoon, I believe Conservative groups next week. And I really want to have good relationships, really want to help you achieve. A fundamental point is that we are accountable to the Mayor and the Mayor is accountable to the Assembly. So as officers, we want to help you achieve your jobs, but that is the accountability chain. And that is going to, if in a scrutiny sense, is how we're going to approach hearings such as this. In terms of your question, Assembly Member, about change, I think, I think I mentioned the idea about more strategic work, and I think, questions are the ways in which scheduling of work programmes can be achieved to help with kind of getting upstream, ensuring that where if the Assembly chooses to, and it's entirely your choice, you're the elected members and the sovereign in this, you can be kind of getting upstream and helping in policy development. I think that's a really important thing. Another thing actually builds on what Richard said earlier, which is that we all know the Mayor has strong powers in some areas and little or no powers in many other areas, and that's why the kind of convening role of the Mayoralty and relations, yes, with boroughs, but with a lot of other organisations across London is really important. And in the principle of trying to get some good out of a terrible situation, where we've got to date on the Recovery Board has been really positive. And I think in that sense we can have some thinking about the role of the Assembly, and if the Mayor is using convening power, well, I think the Assembly has some convening power as well. And are there ways, for example, Borough X and Borough Y have very different approaches to deliver, say, affordable housing, potentially very different, levels of delivery. Well, that's possibly an interesting thing to talk about. If there are some, private developers who aren't behaving the way you would want to see, well, putting them here in public and asking them about it, well, that would be a positive contribution to Londoners. And so I think there's a range of things there. I also think that, and this is more of a private point, there's more we can do around kind of strategic future of the GLA as an organisation and our oversight of our, I guess ultimately our statutory officers and, the direction of the organisation. I think a lot of our private conversations have got into, things that the chief officer is delivering on our behalf and some of the detail of that, and possibly again stepping back, looking forward a bit, looking at the big picture. I think there would be some useful discussions there.
So you're suggesting, are you suggesting that there should be more conversation between your office and kind of Assembly scrutiny planning in terms of looking at opportunities that are coming out that are coming out of the work programmes that you're working on that we should be alerted to earlier in the process, so that scrutiny process, so that we can engage in scrutiny that might also be helpful to you?
Yeah, I think it's that sort of thing. I mentioned a minute ago the police and crime plan is going to be coming out. Obviously there'll be a successor London safety plan as well, and I guess we're getting to the points where those documents are going to come together and come out and be out for consultation. But any discussions and things that the relevant committees have been able to work on in advance of that will obviously be helpful to that process. And so, taking that point and applying it more generally, and, I guess reflecting the GLA's ultimate role as a strategic authority, trying to do that thinking about the future, as well as using, as well as scrutinising delivery and using convening power around it, I think are all very interesting things to look at.
So my final question is, how will you seek to improve key strategic decision-making processes, such as around the budget making and the provision of the future accommodation at the Crystal, to ensure genuine engagement of the Assembly?
Well, I'm not sure I accept the premise of the question. There was, in terms of the move to the Crystal, there was genuine engagement. A proposal was developed. It was consulted on. I set out all the discussions and processes that went on through that. And then the mayor took a decision at the end of it. A very following consultation, a very evidence-based decision. The decision itself was 26 pages. The public appendices, there were 11 of them, they ran to a further 150 pages. There's an awful lot of work and consideration went into that, and everybody's feedback. Similarly, the budget process obviously is, as we all know, set out quite prescriptively in statute in terms of its timing and its nature, and there were a great many opportunities to scrutinise the mayor and those who advise him through that process, and so there were plenty of opportunities for questions to be asked if people felt that information was missing, and that obviously that was done by Budget Performance Committee and in plenary session on a great number of matters.
Yes, I just think we've been through this questioning. We've been we've been told that that you thought possibly that the Assembly's reaction was clouded by personal issues, and yet I've just asked, how can we improve the communication, the kind of those engagement processes? But I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I'll bring in Assembly Member Hall. You wanted to come in?
Thank you. I have to comment on this because I'm really quite furious about this. Not upstream enough. We'll take the two issues that you have mentioned and that Assembly Member Russell has mentioned. Let's start with the Crystal. I don't think there was one member that wanted it. We all made our views well and truly known from all across the political divide. 90% of staff said it was highly inconvenient for them to get there. For us to get guests down there will be exceptionally difficult. We made all this quite clear. We also made it quite clear that we didn't think that the finances added up. By the time that comes to be finally added up, we will be there and stuck there. So talking about opportunities for questions is no good when you don't listen to any of the answers. So most of us are absolutely livid at the ridiculous situation that is us moving down there. That's the one thing. And then you mentioned the budget. Opportunities for questions to be asked if we think of something is missing. That's fine if it's obvious what's missing. But for the last budget, there was over £100 million missing from the draft budget, which meant that when the final budget came out, we were in a completely different situation. So I don't agree with your the way you place this situation. As for saying you value relationships with the Assembly members, I know you know lots of the Labour Assembly members, of course you do, and that would be obvious that you do. But you absolutely don't know the Conservative members. I can't speak for the other two groups. You really don't know them. You don't engage with them. I've never had a meeting with you. I've seen you in the street and we've passed comments. There is no relationship, and there's likely not to be when we all, every one of us, give our opinion on a subject like the crystal, you don't listen. When the staff give you their views on the crystal, you don't listen. And then when we come, and I sit with the hat on as the chair of budget, when we come to look at the finances, there's massive sums of money, and I call £100 million quite a lot of money, not there to be seen. So I would dispute most of what you've just said. There isn't an open and honest conversation, because sometimes we don't ask questions because we have absolutely no idea what's hidden behind the barriers. I could go on, Chair, but I won't because I'm mindful of the time.
Do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Assembly Member. Chair, I think I should briefly. In terms of the budget, it's not helpful probably for me to go through the entire chronology. Did that at Budget and Performance Committee on 19th of March. But we learn about the income we get through the government settlements, and the government final settlements were published on 4th of February, and on the billing authority returns for council tax and business rates, which come in late January or early February. Yeah. It is undeniable that when they came out in a better place than we expected to be. That is an undeniable fact, and it's something that we all had to deal with. I mean, it's good news having the extra funding clearly, but it's every bit as much work for us in terms of producing the budget documents and making the proposals about allocations of funding as it is for the Assembly in terms of scrutinising it. It's not, so it's not a situation that's great for anybody, but that is the reality of it, and we'll set out in the Mayor's budget guidance probably next week a very clear and transparent assessment of where we are on funding sources and the uncertainties we have, and when we expect clarity to be obtained as we go through the process, and I hope that will be helpful. In terms of the crystal, it isn't helpful, I don't think, for me to try and prolong and try and rebut each of your points. Clearly it's not accurate to say that every single member of the Assembly opposed the move. But I think what I would just say is, your response there proved my point.
Let's leave that there. I think we've clearly got some very different views on this. I had just wanted to pick up, you kept talking about us needing to get upstream. Well, I think, some of the committees I work on are upstream. But if you published a forward plan, that would help us with our work to observe that in 6 months' time you're planning to do something on a certain topic. And we could therefore bring in some scrutiny potentially ahead of that to help with that decision. Is that something you'd commit to? Local councils have a duty to publish a forward plan. City Hall doesn't. Is that something you would commit to?
I think it's certainly something we could have a think about, and I think whether a forward plan's quite the right thing, I'm not sure. Richard, you possibly have experience from a borough level that would help.
Borough's forward plans are basically a list of the statutory things that are coming up. Because we could commit to publish a list of the statutory things that are coming up, but it would be a lot thinner than a borough forward plan would be, because it would talk about the police and crime plan and a few other things like that David's already mentioned. But actually, one of the differences between the two kinds of bodies, the statutory responsibilities that fall on the GLA are actually far smaller than the statutory responsibilities that fall on boroughs, which gives us much more flexibility about how we spend our money. I think there's probably a fruitful offline conversation we can have about how we can support you getting ahead of the game and some of that kind of pre-decision scrutiny. I think we all both completely accept you can't pre-scrutinise what you don't know is coming. But we would need to find the right format to do that. But I think we can happily commit to further discussions about that.
The will's there, definitely.
Yeah.
That's positive, thank you. Let's move on. Assembly Member McCartney.
And my questions are to Richard, and it is about the working relationships between the Mayor's office and the Assembly. And you come at it with fresh eyes, I suppose. And so my first question is, what are your initial observations about the working relationship between the Assembly and the Mayor? And how does it compare with your previous role as an executive leader and having a local authority scrutiny body?
I think it's very intense, actually. I mean, the mayor appears before assembly committees far more than I ever appeared before Islington Council scrutiny committees when I was leader. Caroline may have views about that, so there's a significantly higher degree and actually significantly higher resourcing of scrutiny at the GLA. You know, we all think scrutiny is a good thing. I'm not saying that we get that wrong, but it's significantly more intense here than it is at any borough council I'm aware of.
And can I ask, from looking and from hearing David, we know there's a commitment now to have an offline conversation, but what do you consider to be the primary challenges, opportunities to create a effective working relationship?
Look, in being honest, there is always going to be a creative tension between an executive body like the Mayor's Office and an assembly that's going to scrutinise it. That's, you know, we're all adults, and I think we all appreciate that that's how it works. And if I may observe, there is a core difference on a decision like the move to the Crystal, where, you know, people can question process, but ultimately what people are disagreeing about is the end decision, and that's, you know, and I respect the different views on that, but ultimately the mayor is in a position to make a decision on that. And I think so I think there is some things we can do around supporting the assembly to get upstream. I think there is also some things that we can do around support, you know, the kind of quality performance monitoring regime that has been committed to, that can be published. I think will support the assembly in looking at performance as well. I think we're also up for conversations just between assembly members and the mayor's office, as we've tried to commit to do, and the kind of an early round of conversations between the mayor's office and the various groups on the assembly. If people are coming to those conversations in good faith and have genuinely got good ideas, then, you know, no one has a monopoly of wisdom, and we're always very happy to look at that. What there's no point in doing is using private offline meetings to repeat the kind of political knockabout that sometimes happens in public session. I understand that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's move to section which we have touched on a bit, which is around performance reporting, and I'll start with Assembly Member Fortune.
Thank you very much, Chair. I must just quickly say it's been interesting listening to conversations about us working upstream whilst literally being sent down the river. I think it's 19 years tomorrow, I think.
Here all day.
Yeah, 19 years tomorrow since Her Majesty opened the building. And I can't see how scattering the organisation across London is going to help with scrutiny. But yes, performance reporting. It was interesting listening to you earlier, Richard, talking about your view of how you would run scrutiny and performance reporting at your previous borough. I think you were sort of referring to, it's Goodhart's law, isn't it? That when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So using what you learnt from your previous role, what are you going to bring here to the London Assembly that will help us scrutinise from our various offices?
Okay, so where Islington, so if I refer to my previous role, where Islington Council was going on performance monitoring was to take a wider look at what beyond KPIs, which are a limited, in my view, kind of measure of performance success. So I'll give you an example which, you know, anyone to do with Islington will know about, which is housing repairs. Islington, I think, is the second biggest landlord in London. It has an enormous managed housing stock. It does something like 70,000 repairs to its homes each year, of which it has a 91% satisfaction, right first time, high level satisfaction rate with those repairs, which benchmarked against any other social housing provider is really good.
That's Goodhart's law. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. But 9% of 70,000 not being right first time and not having highest levels of satisfaction, still an awful lot of people who then write to councillors to then say, hold on, this repair wasn't done right, it was done inefficiently, you brought the wrong bulb, or whatever it was. And the vast majority of council casework in Islington is then largely dealt up with housing issues. And so effectively it was how you take what could quite easily be discussed as saying, well, benchmarked against other social housing providers, actually we're top of class, we're really good at this, into a conversation that says, but hold on, I'm still getting quite a lot of my council casework people are unhappy, and what can we do to get even better? And it's taking that kind of experiential that kind of experiential data, survey data, rounded out with broadcast which allowed us as elected members to hold officers better to account, so you couldn't just hide behind figures.
So we're going to have comparative analysis.
Well, it's harder to do that. So that's what you ask what Islington did, and that's where I was taking Islington when I was leader. It's hard to do that here because, frankly, you have far fewer service users because we aren't a frontline body that provides frontline services. And I think one of the things we are looking for is where there are sensible equivalent kind of measures that both have a set of KPIs, because the numbers matter, but making sure that they are proportionate, reasonable, and meaningful. And then what we can do, not least working with partners, because a lot of what we do is delivered through commissioning, and almost everything we do is delivered through commissioning and through partners, to then find out what we can get from broader sense of what Londoners feel about the government of London. And I think what David has been keen to establish for a while is therefore a quite limited sense of performance KPIs about the stuff we do directly, where we can use numbers to effectively judge our own performance, and then a wider suite of outcomes for Londoners we can use to assess quality of life in the city and what we can collectively do as a partnership to try to improve Londoners' quality of life.
From sitting in the Mayor's office then, do you have a suite of tools or implements that you use to scrutinise partners, such as Metropolitan Police, TfL, etc.? And do your scrutiny tools and performance management tools, are they reflected in what's used here in the interface with the London Assembly?
So I'm going to ask David to talk about partners, if that's all right.
Yeah, so in terms of all the functional bodies, they, like the GLA, produce performance reports every quarter, and so the relevant deputy mayor will have their own scrutiny arrangements, which so fire and resilience. There's the fire and resilience board, which the deputy mayor has. The deputy mayor for policing and crime has an oversight board, which is a forum for that challenge. Obviously, the deputy mayor for transport is deputy chair for TfL, and there's the formal committee and board structure for that purpose. And then every quarter I meet with their own deputy mayor and the relevant functional body leaderships to go through their quarterly performance report and answer any questions that I've got on it. And that obviously then is published, and so we're not holding back any information. We're giving to the Assembly and to the public the same information that we have. There's a question which kind of brings me on to my view of the world, if the committee wants me to go there, about how we evolve that approach in the future and try and ensure that we're getting a wider view from about the state of London.
Just because I'm mindful of time, I do think there's a hole as a relatively new member of the Assembly. And I understand the point about not having KPIs. I understand the point about having no forward plans, etc. But there does seem to be a hole, either in perception or reality, about our ability to understand whether or not something is working.
And to clarify my argument, isn't that we don't need KPIs; it's that we need the right KPIs.
I agree with you.
I think it's, and therefore, Mary and I and David and I are having active conversations at the moment about what they are, and they will come to you in the quarter one performance report, and then that is going to be, in order to get this right, a kind of work in progress, and then we can work to get the right KPIs in the quarterly performance reporting. So that will be the document that you can see.
That would be. I should stop there, otherwise it's not fair to cover.
So just it will iterate. The other just point to make very quickly is, from my experience, is that we can put out numbers, but ultimately, actually, what they should do is there should be a prompt for discussion. And I think getting the Assembly's committees, for the relevant areas, to be having those discussions, yes, deputy mayors, but senior officers as well, is part of what you should be doing, in the scrutiny work, because I think, we can produce reams of information, but actually we're human, and it's the conversation that helps us understand and unpick things and learn.
Thank you. Assembly Member Sahota.
Thank you, Chair. How will you judge the Mayor's success over the next 3 years? And his performance, rather?
But again, it's a subjective interpretation of information, isn't it? And so what we need to think about is how we provide the information. And the way I think about it, I'll try and be as concise as I can, is that we need to be firstly setting out, what is the state of London, and how the city is performing against the kind of sort of high level outcomes that would matter to Londoners in terms of everyone having a good job, achieving their net carbon targets, keeping Londoners safe, things like that. And then underneath that, programmes and projects will help to maintain or improve that, which obviously should be put forward based on the Mayor's strategies. And that will include the recovery missions, it will include things that are just GLA or just functional body, or things perhaps that are just borough or other partners. And how do we get for those both what are those projects, programmes achieving, but also how do we see early indicators in terms of whether they're driving in the right direction. So obviously the thing we all would want to see would be lots of affordable housing completed and inhabited. And so yes, you've got starts as a leading indicator of that, but you've potentially got things before that in terms of the funding agreements that are in place to allocate affordable housing grant, or potentially planning permissions, things like that. And so trying to get some of those leading indicators so that we can see if we're heading in the right direction, and we can course correct if we're not. And also through that, the ability in terms of a system which Londoners, Assembly, etc., all have public access to slice and dice some of this data, so you can look at trends over time. Right, why has that got better? Why has that performance got worse? And also look at the delivery by constituent parts. So, what's the GLA's delivery on affordable housing like? What's TfL's? What's Borough X's? What's Borough Y's? And just trying to create that environment of view so that people can look and see what's going on, and that then creates the basis for the conversations and the opinions to be formed all the time. Trying to set out clearly where responsibility lies for the different things, recognising that sometimes absolutely it's the Mayor, other times it's very much not.
I mean, you started saying that it's all subjective, but I think if we've learned anything over the last 18 months, that is data is more important than just subjective opinions. So where are those measurable, those objectives which I can be looking at over the next 3 years or 5 years? Well, 3 years is relevant to you, but I mean, how can I be saying that progress is being made on these areas? Where are those measurable things? Where are those data which I can be looking at?
Yeah, I agree with you on your first point, remember, and what I guess I was trying to get across, perhaps badly, was that absolutely you need the data, but different people will have different opinions about whether that data shows success or failure. Yeah. So in terms of where we are, clearly as the GLA, we've been producing quarterly performance reports which have been the performance of each unit on a page. I think we've done quite a good job in terms of saying, well, look, this is what the unit's doing. I think we've done quite a poor job of actually linking together in terms of the outcomes and the impact on Londoners, and that's one of the things that we didn't get right. And therefore, in the new approach, we need to be much more clearer about outcomes and what are the key things we're doing that should be driving those, and trying to take that early view. So, as the committee will have got from my previous answer, there's probably quite a big vision there in terms of what we think we need to deliver, and that's something it will incrementally build over time. And what I hope is that the Q1 reports, I've yet to see the drafts or the, really any particular detail on them at all, and I think that's my joy for next week, so I look forward to that. Clearly we're going to, as Richard said, build over time, but we absolutely want that framework, and then over time that will move into an online system that we all can play with to our heart's content, and we can, some data will update much more frequently than quarterly, because that's if we've got new data, we should be pushing it out there, not holding it back.
And of course, I mean, in the last mayoral term, some serious and historic events took place. One was, of course, that we left the European Union, and the Grenfell fire tragedy, and of course then the coronavirus pandemic. These were unexpected events that happened. How are you prepared to deal with other unexpected events that may take place in the delivery of the objectives of the mayor?
So, things happen small and large, don't they? And so there's first of all, there's just a piece that's good project and program management about, risk management and so forth. Clearly, I don't expect many of our projects had a global pandemic on their risk registers. And one of the things I think we need to, further improve at is around our responsibilities under the Civil Contingencies Act, where clearly we touched earlier on a range of really difficult situations in London, and I don't think as an authority we're fully in the place where we can say yes, absolutely. The risks that are identified either at a national level by the government or at a London level by the risk register, that we're fully clear on how we as an authority are both A, doing our bit to contribute to mitigations, and also B, how we are ready in a business continuity sense to react should they occur. Yeah. We were clearly very fortunate that the Chief Officer's transformation programme had virtually completed in the terms of rollout of laptops to staff, and that and the associated changes. We were able to work from home. If COVID-19 had struck a couple of years before, we'd have been in a very difficult position indeed, I think, organisationally. So we've got work to do, and so a group of us are meeting fairly regularly now to work through this and try and ensure that we're absolutely top notch on this stuff. And obviously, we need to ensure corporately that that plays out in terms of the Assembly, so that the Assembly is able to continue its function. Both generally in response to an incident that occurs, but also playing into your function response to the specifics around the incident and your scrutiny of the response that's going on.
Thank you. And the other thing I'm told, I haven't counted this, but I'm told that the Mayor made 300 commitments in the 2021 manifesto. Are you tracking how the Mayor's delivering on those 300 commitments? And when will they be added to the dashboard? So,
I think the first thing to say is I know Assembly officers have put together their perspective on what commitments are from the manifesto. I'm grateful that's been shared. We're in the process of pulling together what we hope will be a definitive list, because we think we all need a single version of the truth on this. And it's no criticism to say that there are a few things in the draft we've seen that aren't quite right. We're not quite going at that at the ideal pace, because as the committee knows, we're restructuring the Mayor's office. We don't yet have everybody in post, but we will do that. And this summer, it's my expectation that Mayor's office and Assembly officers will sit down, and hopefully we get to the point where we've got this agreed single list. Then, in terms of it, I guess it's important to think about the nature of commitments. Some of them will be very binary, yes, no, right? Has the Mayor done this bit of lobby? Has the Mayor lobbied about X? Has Y been opened? Yeah. Other things will be more qualitative. We'll keep such and such down, or ensure that there are more police officers, or whatever the particular commitment may be, and it will fluctuate through time. What I'm very keen on is ensuring that we don't duplicate effort and we're efficient, and that a periodic view of where the mayor's at on manifesto commitments can be efficiently produced and can point to to dashboards, to the KPIs we're publishing, where that data is there. And it's all those things that are qualitative in terms of the commitments. Question: will every single one of them make sense to be in the dashboards? Well, I can't guarantee that. We'll look at each one on its merits, but obviously we do need to ensure the data is periodically out there.
And of course, some of them will be dependent upon the level of cooperation you get from the government. Look at police numbers as being one example.
Yeah.
So there will be some commitments made right which are dependent upon the government delivering with the mayor.
I mean, absolutely, clearly, the British system, Parliament, government in Parliament is sovereign, and anything that any mayor wants to achieve is ultimately about the powers and resources that are available, and that's hopefully as I've said previously, a matter for the mayor, not me as an officer, but hopefully that's something that the mayor had in mind in terms of the development of the manifesto. It's also why partnership working is so important. So absolutely, we can't make Borough X or private sector organisation Y or Charity Z do something, but we can we can work together and try and work towards common goals, and we want to do that, and we want to try and be as transparent as we can be about progress, both where that's good and where it's not where ideally we'd like it to be.
If I may, I think one of the things I've been very struck by in joining is the sincerity of the mayor in saying he wants to build bridges as a result of the election. The reality, the mayor has been re-elected comfortably on a three-year term. The government have got about 3 years left on their term as well. Neither is going anywhere, and therefore the more constructively they work together in the interests of Londoners, frankly, the better. And I think I very much get the sense that the mayor's genuine intentions to build bridges, both with government, with boroughs, with a whole range of partners, is recognised and is starting to pay dividends in building more constructive relationships. And I think, for example, the really, really positive collaboration we've seen between the government and the mayor on the vaccine rollout is one of the good early indicators of actually we can do far more constructively together than by locking ourselves in political disputes.
Thank you. I'm conscious we have overrun, but there's been a lot of questions to ask. Final question, Assembly Member Hall, and then we'll bring this bit to a close.
Thank you. I seem to miss, when did you say the definitive list of commitments is going to be published, or your view of the commitments?
So what it says to say, you don't really have the person in post who's going to do that, but this summer we will sit with the Assembly officers and try and get to that single view. Hopefully that will be relatively straightforward, and we can get it published, and then again with that person in post and consulting the Assembly, we can work out what is an appropriate approach to providing updates on performance against them.
Yes, you see, I heard all that, but I didn't hear a date. So can you give us a date that it will definitely be done by? Because that is something that we can hold you to account for.
So I think it depends on an appointment, a key appointment in the mayor's office, which we don't have time to say.
Yeah, I'm waiting. Had a meeting yesterday with HR. I'm waiting for them to come back to me on a key date around the implementation of the restructure, which then is going to drive our ability to fill the posts and have somebody who's actually going to do the work. It is like, I appreciate Assembly Member having worked together. For many years, your desire for a firm concrete date, you hold to one. If I had one, I'd happily give you it. I haven't right now, but I want it done too. There's no kind of dispute about that.
It's 3 months on. I think I helpfully sent you a list of the commitments.
And I say very, very grateful for that.
I'm sure.
I've not seen it. Colleagues who look at it say there are a few things in there they don't think are right, and that's why we've got to have.
Well, can you just give us a stab? Because all we keep being is sent into the distance. We're looking at this is a problem. The pandemic's there, it goes on, but nevertheless, we've got plenty of staff. Give us a date that you would definitely give us the definitive list of commitments from the mayor that we can hold you to account for?
Well, I've definitively said summer, and so if you want a definitive date, well, that will be 21st September, because that will be the...
Right,
nobody
so by
could
the
argue beyond
21st
that
of
would be the end
September.
of summer.
21st or the end of September?
No, 21st is
21st,
fine.
you say? 21st,
That's,
fine.
I
Yeah.
consider that to be the end of summer. I think
Right, Deep Joy,
Wow, we've got a date.
thank you very much.
astronomically.
Anything else?
The way the budget was presented it had changed considerably, making it extremely difficult for us to scrutinise. There's a theme running through all of this, isn't it? However, David, you were very helpful, and you told the Budget and Performance Committee on the 15th of June that an internal analysis was underway to group your commitments into 3 broad categories: those which are already in the budget, those which are broadly in the budget, but which may see a change of focus, and those which are not in the budget. So what progress have you made with the internal analysis to do with the budget, and when will that conclude?
Richard, you're probably close to that, 'cause it's really a GLA budget question.
Yes, it is. So we're making significant progress on it at the moment. I think the conceptual problem there is though, is it sort of assumes all these things have a single interpretation, or every manifesto commitment has a single interpretation of how you implement it, and therefore is costable. And the world, as we all know, is far more complex than that. So if you take a manifesto commitment to lobby the government over police numbers, is that discharged by a single letter? Is it discharged by a letter in a meeting? How you know, we can all come to a fair definition of what the interpretation of that is, but it's not always going to be the same, and therefore there isn't a single, as we said as we said when we met to talk about this in June, and we said in our letter back to you as a result of your summary of the of that session, there isn't a single kind of there isn't a single view yet taken about the nature of the way in which we implement a whole range of bits of the manifesto. We're working through that now.
Obviously, work was done on this before. I can't imagine for 1 minute that the Mayor would have promised anything without knowing that he could actually deliver it. So therefore, a lot of work must have gone on before in order for him to go on to television programmes and anywhere else and say, I commit to doing this and I commit to do it. Surely Mayor Khan wouldn't have done that lest somebody had actually done some figures behind the scenes.
And you'd be happy to know he didn't.
I mean, I just referred to the comment I made at the previous meeting that the development of the manifesto and the process that allowed the Mayor and the London Labour Party to put the commitments in the manifesto they did is a matter for them, and as officers of the authority in politically restricted roles, that's not something we can get involved in. What we have to do now is to the manifesto is there, and both whether you're in the Mayor's office or whether you're in one of the other directorates is pick it up, look at some things are very black and white about what they involve, others there are real options, and discussions about those other options are underway, as Richard says.
And I think just take it comes back to the nature of the conversation. The conversation we had about half an hour ago about the relationship between the Mayor's office and the Assembly. It depends how you want to play it, doesn't it? We can have an honest conversation in these about the complexity of manifesto implementation, about the range of different options that we have, or we can, or we can have a go at each other. I'd much prefer to do the
No, we're looking for an honest conversation, and actually every single one of us is looking for honest answers, and we're looking for ways we can benchmark. Now, the Mayor stood up and said that he would, and actually when he came to the Budget and Performance Committee, he welcomed the idea of establishing benchmarks, etc. But if he stood up and said, I promise Londoners I will deliver this, vote for me, etc., etc., then he must have had a costed up manifesto. All you have to do is to ask the people that costed up where they got their figures from. If not, you should be working 24/7 to try and make sure that this goes into the budget. The budget rounds will start again soon. We want to know, all of us, how he's going to pay for his manifesto pledges upon which Londoners voted him in. Is that fair?
It was just a question.
Is that fair?
What that you want to know, is it fair? Yes, I'm sure that's fair.
Is it fair that not only I want to know and this committee, but Londoners want to know? If he's promised things, how is it going to be paid for? It's quite a simple question, and I would have thought it would deserve an answer. So
do you think
Sorry,
we'll
I'm
have
sorry,
that
forgive me, I'm not sure what the
information?
question is though.
the original question is when Mr. Bellamy said on the 15th of June that we were going to do, that you were going to do an internal analysis to tell us what was the three board categories, those that are already in the budget, those that are broadly in the budget but may see changes of focus, and those which are not in the budget. It's quite simple. You obviously can't answer. We have to move on.
So, well, you asked me a question,
I think
you
what
the chance to
the
answer
Assembly
it.
member is saying quite clearly is there was a pledge about the manifesto and how each bit
And
was
the
being
time,
funded.
forgive me, you're after the timetable for
when
when
we might see that aspect. So, we're agreeing what the manifesto commitments are, which is going to be this by 21st September. But then, presumably alongside that, you're going to be showing which bits actually are already funded. They're in the budget. Lots of the transport ones are also already in the TfL budget. Which bits you've got to adjust the budget and which ones you've got to get new funding for.
It's quite clear.
So when do you think we'll have that piece of work that David referred to in June?
I think I don't think it is as clear. Actually, sorry, I don't want to. I want,
Was
do want
to
to challenge
David on the
premise
15th of June?
of the question. No, that isn't what David committed to on the 15th of June.
I
was
just
in the meeting
quoted
at the same time. So David said that work was going ahead. What we need to understand is within the various range of possibilities that we've got to interpret the manifesto, how we fit that against our current budget and the current budgeted priorities, and quite a lot sits in the current budget, and versus what we might have to find extra money for. And given the Mayor's budget isn't rising, therefore the activities that we may have to cease, and all of that work will take place with the budget process that the Mayor's guidance note is going to set out, and we go through the normal process.
Let's take this offline, because I think, it's reasonable that we want to see what you're committed to, how we can measure you, and how it's funded. And I think maybe you've promised to work on this over the summer, whether it's Gina or Officer can liaise with you, just to try to make sure we've got something.
I'm happy to have private conversations, see if we can help clarify this. I mean, maybe there is a differing in interpretation about it.
Okay, lovely. Let's bring that to a close. Thank you very much. We have overrun, but it's been very, very useful to us. Thank you very much for your time and attendance today, Richard and David. We have other business to move on to, quite a lot of it, so thank you very much for your time this morning. Feel free to leave. Members, can we note the reporter's background to put in questions to our guests and delegate authority to me as Chair in consultation with the Deputy Chairman and Party Group Lead members to agree any output from this meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed, lovely, and agree the recommendations. Officers in the gallery, if you'd like to come down. Apologies, we've kept you waiting. I'm hoping the next bit of the meeting will be maybe slightly quicker. Hopefully officers come in. So our first report is item 6, which is the workforce report. I'll just let Charmaine get to her seat. Just say to officers, we're not expecting introductions. We're just going to go straight to questions. For our members to come in. Thank you all. Charmaine, sorry to put you on the spot. Workforce report, item 6. Any members have questions on this? Okay, that's Assembly Member Sahota, Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Sham, this workforce report shows that 29% of our workforce are BME, which is slightly lower than the year before, which the figure was 30%. There's ambition to improve these figures so that we meet the 37% target by 2025, which would make us representative of London's working age population. Can you provide us with further details on how you're working with partners like the Race Equity Action Group to achieve this?
Yes, thank you, Assembly Member. So, yes, we did hit a high of 30% actually just before the pandemic struck. Unfortunately, we then had to curtail recruitment, and actually over the course of the year, in preparation for the budget, we actually paused in some recruitment, particularly given the uncertainty that the facing us in terms of the budget. So we are working now to move from 29% upward. We've got a target that's higher than that. Obviously, it's the working age population in London. We've established a Race Equity Action Group. We went out across the organisation to seek volunteers and those who were passionate about the subject. We've set up a number of work streams underneath that Race Action Race Equity Action Group. One of the first areas that we've started to look at is education. So particularly working with our partners, business in the community, who do a lot of work on race and race equity, to think about how we can make our managers and our staff more confident talking about race in the workplace, particularly given, as you said earlier in the first part of this meeting, the big issues that this country faced over the last year, and how that's played out in workplaces. So we have a Let's Talk About Race education programme that we've rolled out with volunteers. I think it's fair to say we need to build on some of the work we did on progression. We did a pilot similar to our time pilot for gender, but looking at how we progress those staff who have the most potential from ethnic minority backgrounds, and I think we need to think about how we can expand that and grow that. Mary, as Chief Officer and responsibility with overall responsibility for diversity, has committed to an independent review on how barriers that could be in the GLA that we are not seeing, that we're not presenting themselves in relation to race, and that will report back, I believe, early in 2022, and that will form a key part of our strategy going forward.
So this is one figure which we will be watching. The other thing is that the number of staff with disabilities working for the GLA is at 6%, and the figure for the general population of London is 12%. So how are we making it more easier? How are we reducing the barriers for staff with disabilities to work for the GLA?
Thank you. And actually that speaks to, in fact, the next item on the agenda, the workplace adjustment policy, significantly, but I'll talk about it here, and there may be overlap to later in the meeting. We started work in 2019 to look at this very carefully. We wanted to benchmark ourselves against some really good kite marks like disability confident. Other employers have those. And the key barriers, we saw that we didn't have the confidence of staff with disabilities. So we undertook an independent review with a specialist consultancy, GOS Consultancy. They specialise in issues around disability. They made a number of recommendations to us. We are now implementing those recommendations. And in fact, the workplace adjustment policy that we're consulting members on here, our staff, forms a big component part of how we want to communicate and support staff with their disabilities to reach their maximum potential. Also, referring to David and the Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff conversation earlier, one of the manifesto commitments that has been made is to publish a disability pay gap, and we'll be using snapshot data for March 2021 to do that. And we will be publishing that alongside, of course, the statutory requirements for gender and the non-statutory requirements for ethnicity.
Just finally, of course, we have aspirations of getting 30% of our workforce from the BME community. But of course, that number is important, but also what's important is the progression and the grading, and that they make sure that this representation at every level of the organisation. So how are we tracking the progression, and how are we making sure that people are progressing in their career lines and making it to the top positions in the organisation?
So the hard data is set out in our ethnicity pay gap report. And of course, one of those, the Race Equality Action Group, one of the work streams is looking specifically at progression. So I think it will be a combination of being very, having a very honest dialogue when we see the recommendations that the independent reviewers make about progression and addressing those with the executive. And I am Mary's made very clear that the corporate management team will be leading on that, and she's personally involved in the selection of the independent supplier that's going to support us in that. One of the key requirements we've made of them is that it has to be data-led. So this has to be about actually what are the statistics in the organisation about progression. I think it's fair to say in the 4 years I've been here, we certainly have more ethnic minority staff at the senior leadership team than ever before. I was the only one when I joined in 2017. I think that's changed significantly. We hope we can grow on that over the next period.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. I mean, Dr. Sahota has mentioned the thing that I'm most concerned about, and I accept it's mentioned in the next report, the number of disabled staff having reduced from 73 to 68. I'm concerned, is this a downward trend, and do you think it is? And have people left for career progression, or is it something to do with how we support disabled staff in the workplace?
My honest assessment is that not having a formal workplace adjustment policy sent out the wrong message to our disabled staff on how we would support them. We had a guidance document which went some way, but certainly didn't have some of the newer elements that we are now consulting on, for example, a disability passport, which will go with staff as they move around the organisation. I think our focus with managers was when disabilities presented themselves, and we have a very good occupational health partner in TfL to help us with that. But actually, as the cover paper for that particular policy sets out, it's about supporting staff before disabilities or conditions become so chronic that they start to affect their role and then they need to move on. So there's much more emphasis now in this new policy about identifying and having managers support staff with those conditions in the early stages before they become a very difficult issue. We also, in that policy, have taken a different view of disability leave. We've looked at the NHS. The NHS has just published its own policies on for its own staff around disability leave, and how leave is recorded, how the conversation about taking leave to support your conditions is managed with a manager, and then how that's brought into, for example, a disability passport. I do think it's very difficult for staff to talk about disabilities. We know from our declaration rates, and that's not just the GLA, that would be many, many employers, that there are still stigmas attached to declaring disabilities in the workplace. So we want to make sure the passport is a way for having that conversation recorded. And if it's very sensitive issues, then the individual doesn't have to repeat that conversation as they move around. So to Assembly Member Sahota's questions about progression, that will support officers feeling confident that they can move to other jobs with the passport in place.
Yes, I find it hard to think that somebody wouldn't or would come because of a policy as opposed to the way they're treated, because not everybody goes to how shall I treat somebody, let me look up the policy. It's the way we look after disabled staff, and I would suggest that most of us here think that they are right up there at the top of the people that we should be looking after. I'll move on from that. Are you concerned that I think it's 68 of the posts are agency, and are you looking to reduce that?
Yes, so we have very different controls in place over the last 3 years on agency staff. We did hit a high, I think, back in August 2019. That number has come down considerably since then. Our pausing on recruitment over the last year during the pandemic has meant we're carrying a greater number of vacancies. So the vast majority of those agency workers, 85% of them, I think the report sets out, are sitting in budgeted posts. These are not over and above our budgeted numbers. There are always going to be new and different needs which emerge. The last year has shown that, but the controls I think we have in place, which are actually for the Chief Officer to agree all agency requests, means that we are very closely monitoring any agency workers who are not budgeted for or sitting in posts that are not on our establishment.
Yes, we must always try and employ people in the most economical way for obvious reasons. Mary, do you think it's acceptable that 12% of our staff prefer not to state their sexuality or don't feel confident enough providing a response?
So I would like everyone to feel confident enough to express it, yes. So the 12%, I would like to be much less. I would like that to be nobody. Charmaine will know better than me what sort of the industry standards are about that. But we've had a number of campaigns to try and get people to make all the relevant declarations to them. And we've seen some improvements in declarations, but we just got to keep going.
Definitely do, so that people feel comfortable with whatever they put down. One last question, Chair, if I may. Mary, are you measuring at all whether staff that are leaving, they're leaving because of the relocations to the Crystal and it being so much more difficult to travel to? Are you actually measuring that?
I'm going to ask Charmaine to comment on that. I have said to the committee before that we will take great care to keep track of the impact on retention of the move.
Okay, so there must be results then.
I think I've got a summary actually in this workforce report on the exit interviews. So exit interviews are voluntary. We encourage all managers and staff to enter into exit interviews. There's a set pro forma which asks for reasons that someone's leaving. We can make sure that pro forma is covering off relocation or additional travel time, etc. I should say that at the moment that isn't appearing through the exit interviews. People are leaving for other reasons. I could see possibly working for larger organisations, maybe where there is a greater opportunity, for example, for career progression. But we can certainly make sure that we have that as a particular reason that somebody could tick a box for and be able to report on it.
I thought we were already doing that.
Well, it will be. It could be volunteered, I think, is probably how the pro forma is set out.
What percentage of people that leave do an exit interview?
I don't know the percentage, but the report sets out off the leavers that I think over 50% of the leavers in the last period did an exit interview. Some choose not to do an exit interview. We offer everyone the option of doing an exit and interview.
Yes, well, I definitely think we should find out whether it is because we're moving to the Crystal, because we've gone through this for nearly a year now, and we're all having problems recruiting people. So I'm sure that features in it. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Assemblymember Fortune, you wanted to come in.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to echo my colleague's points there, that as we do move out of this purpose-built building to a smaller building that's not fit for purpose, I think it's going to be an increasing element with staff. Sickness levels, and this sort of arches over to the next agenda item as well. How are sickness levels across the GLA over the last couple of years, specifically for those people living with a disability, but more wider and more generally as well?
Yes, I'll speak generally first. Our sickness levels have been below the public sector benchmark for all 4 years that I've been here in the organisation. We remind, and there are very clear and easy ways for managers to record sickness. This is not a burdensome issue. It's easy to go into iTrain our people system and click a few buttons in order to open that system. We have very few long-term absence cases. The majority of absences are to do with muscular skeleton and mental health. I think we've seen more a rise in mental health as a reason over the last period. And then, given that it's a general question about absence, I don't think I can not answer it if I didn't mention COVID in the last year. We had 610 days recorded as sickness absence due to confirmed cases of COVID over the last year. It equates to around about 11% of our sickness in that time period. Of course, those with mild COVID symptoms were working from home and continue to work from home. So, I think those are the cases where people were absolutely unable to continue to work. That's been, I think, generally low because we have been, in the main, supporting our workforce to stay safe.
I mean, that's really encouraging, and I'm sure you're doing interviews with those members of staff who are on long-term sickness.
Exactly.
Just driving back to the disability issue, and sorry, Chair, this does sort of bridge over to item 7. One of the purposes there was to drive down sickness levels for those staff living with disability. So can you remind me again of what those numbers were?
I don't have them to hand, Assembly Member, but I'm very happy to write and to make clear how much of that is related to disability absence, and also make clear how much of that is for classed as disability leave.
Yeah, I mean, especially as we move to a new working environment as well, which is going to be more fluid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, members, can we note the workforce report? And let's move on to item 7, the workplace adjustment policy. We've already started discussing that. Are there any further questions from members on that, or have you included them all in the other section? No? So can we note the contents of the report, and have we got any particular comments on the workplace adjustment policy? Are we generally supportive of it, is what I'm picking up. Yeah, so we're very happy with it. Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you, Charmaine. I don't know if you've got any other papers. If not, Charmaine, you're free to leave.
Yeah,
and David as well, you're lovely. Thank you very much. Great, let's move to item 8. And I think we've got Sarah Mully joining us. Yes, Sarah, as if by magic, has appeared on a screen. Welcome, Sarah, joining us remotely today. We're not taking any introductions on the paper. We're going to move straight to questions. And I've seen Marina already. And, Assembly Member Carr, Assembly Member Prince, after you. Off you go.
Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I have deep concerns about the impact of this restructure on the GLA's food team. This food team, as you know, has won national and international accolades, and it has made this mayor a world leader in a whole systems food policy. Food policy is a priority of the mayor's manifesto. The changes to the food team suggest that food policy in the GLA will be led by non-experts. How will the GLA's work on food change as a result of these changes?
Thank you, and apologies to Assembly members that I'm having to appear remotely. I'm currently self-isolating along with the rest of my household, so sorry I can't be with you in person. Thank you for the question, and I suppose just to give a bit of context here, the COVID pandemic has obviously changed very much the context for our food work, and the work that the food team have delivered has changed, as you would expect, over the past 18 months to reflect that. And in particular, there has already been a much greater focus on work which addresses food insecurity. And I should say work which addresses food insecurity in a really kind of holistic way that recognises that there are not simple solutions to that challenge. And indeed, the proposals here reflect that view. So the work of the team in terms of the programmatic delivery work that the team oversees is already very focused on that. And I think that Assembly members will understand why that is the case, given the challenges that London has faced during the pandemic and the challenges that London will face coming out of the pandemic. You are, though, of course, right that these proposals do propose a change in how we resource that work. And we are talking here about bringing the existing food team together with other work that supports Londoners facing financial insecurity and hardship to reflect that increased focus and priority on food insecurity. It is absolutely, though, not the intention for that to be the limit of the GLA's work on food. As you all know, we have an expert London Food Board which supports work across a number of issues, and that work will continue. There is work going on across the organisation related to food. So we are, for example, there's some very good work going on at the moment around skills and employment in the hospitality sector. There is work going on in relation to healthy food and obesity. There is work around the environmental impacts of our food system, and that work will all continue. So this paper is proposing some changes to this particular team, but that should not be read, I think, as a statement that all the work of the organisation will then be limited to food insecurity. But we are facing challenges here in terms of how we prioritise our resources. We're trying to make sure that we are balancing the need to focus on a small number of priorities, and that we can really really deliver on with retaining that cross-cutting work. We are in active conversations with the chair of the London Food Board about how we do that and making sure that we continue that, as you say, that very effective, cross-cutting approach and strategy. And we'll be working with the Food Board to refresh the implementation plan for the food strategy in the coming months to reflect those conversations about priorities. And we are also talking to the Food Board about how we resource this work across the piece, so not just in communities and social policy. So I hope that provides a little bit of context for where these proposals sit in some of those wider conversations. So to underline, we're absolutely committed still to the broader work on food, and we will be looking to resource that not just in this team, which is under discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Your answer, and forgive me, the sound quality wasn't brilliant, so I might not have heard everything that you said, but I think your answer seems to suggest that you're talking about work being done across the board as opposed to directly from the food team. This restructure suggests that we will only focus on food insecurity as a financial issue. In that case, won't we lose the ability to do the cross-cutting and the fine-tuning of work around food issues in pregnancy and childhood, on obesity, food waste and growing sustainable food, because that will then be led by non-experts in the field?
That's absolutely not our intention, and Assembly members will be aware that we have, for example, a recovery mission which is particularly focusing on healthy food and obesity, which is one of the issues that you refer to there, and we're obviously drawing on a huge amount of expertise around those issues from across, from the GLA's own health team, for example, and from across the wider health system, from partners who have been part of the Child Obesity Task Force, as well as from the Food Board. So we have all kinds of sources of expertise to draw on across the organisation and with our partnerships. And I think that working in a partnership way means that we have to be very clear about what we can bring and where we need to work more effectively with partners to source some of that very specialist expertise. So we absolutely recognise the value of expertise and absolutely value the work that the team have done, but we are trying to balance the changing priorities that have come from the current context and from the new recovery priorities, with trying to deploy resources to best effect to meet those resources. And we obviously don't want to, as Assembly members will be aware, just continue to add lots more additional posts to teams in order to deliver. So we are trying to strike the right balance here.
Thank you. You've referred to key partners such as the London Food Board. Can you tell me what feedback you've had from key partners such as the London Food Board and Sustain about the actual impact and possible issues that may come out of these changes of these proposals? You're in the middle of a consultation. What kind of feedback are you having?
So we're having a very constructive conversation, as I said, with the chair of the Food Board about trying to map out what the priorities for that board will be in the coming period, given the context. So I should say that we were due to publish an implementation plan for the London food strategy last year, and that was obviously delayed by the pandemic. So we are now looking at refreshing that implementation plan. So the colleagues in the Mayor's office and in the team are having conversations with the chair of the Food Board about the work. I'm aware that there are some concerns from members of the Food Board and others about these proposals, and obviously this is a consultation and this is the right time to be having those conversations. So we are talking to them to try and make sure that we can provide the right reassurance to them about our resourcing for this work across the piece. But I think it's right that the conversation we're having with the Food Board and with other stakeholders is about the work and making sure that we have an agreed set of priorities for our work on food, and then obviously it's for us to make sure that we're resourcing those appropriately. So as I say, this is a consultation period. These are proposals. We are absolutely having those conversations with the team, with the Food Board, with other stakeholders, and trying to as I say, to strike the right balance in terms of managing these different priorities.
I understand that, and thank you. That was a very detailed response, but I specifically asked about the response to these proposals. What have they said about the proposals for the restructuring?
So they have raised some questions and concerns about whether or not there will, if these proposals went ahead as planned, whether or not there would be sufficient, I suppose, sort of secretariat and coordination resource to support the work of the London Food Board. And we're absolutely committed to making sure that we provide that. And so that's the conversation that we're having. So I suppose, yeah, there are some concerns and discussions are happening about that, but we're trying to reassure people, as I'm trying to reassure you, that we are committed to continuing that relationship with the Food Board, that we're committed to continuing broad work on food, and we're absolutely open to the conversation with them as well as with yourselves and with the team about how we best resource that.
And what about the level of expertise that will then be missing from the team in particular if these proposals go ahead? What have the key partners said about that?
So I think you're right that there are some concerns from partners about that. Again, I would hope that we can reassure them on that. I should emphasise, we're not expecting there to be any compulsory redundancies as a result of these proposals. Obviously, everybody in the team will have opportunities to apply for new roles and to be ring-fenced for new roles if these proposals go ahead as planned. The intention is not to diminish our expertise in this area. And as I said, I think we also need to, I need to give credit to others across the organisation who also have all kinds of expertise that are relevant to this, whether that is around health or sustainability or economy. We have expertise across the organisation, and part of what we're trying to do here is make sure that we can deploy all of those expertise to support this work.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of what I wanted to cover was ably covered by my colleague. But I just wanted to go a bit deeper on the expertise point. From the diagrams that I've been given, it's clear that under the current organisational structure that the 2 G10 posts and the G8 post for food are all being deleted. Now, you say that these people will have an opportunity to apply for some of the new posts, but of course if you are a level 10, G10 officer, you're not likely to apply for the level 8 posts, are you? So, I think maybe the single level 8 officer may or may not have that opportunity to apply for the level 8 vacancies, but as far as the G10 posts are concerned, they're pretty much being reduced from, it looks as though it's reducing from 3 to 2. I might be wrong there, but that's what it looks like to me. And there is this issue about the level of expertise and the fact that with this particular area, there's a lot of relationships that have obviously been built up over a period, and it's very difficult to rebuild relationships over any short period. And also it seems that some of the partners, Sustain being one, feel they haven't been consulted on this at all. So how are you going to sort of square that?
Thank you. I mean, obviously, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to talk about individual members of staff in this context, and we don't know at this stage which roles individual members of staff will choose to put themselves forward for, or indeed whether these proposals will be changed as a result of the consultation period. What I would say is that absolutely, as I say, there is absolutely no intention, or there will be no compulsory redundancies as a result of this proposal. Everybody in the team will have the opportunity to apply for to put themselves forward for roles according to their current grades. And there is, as you will have seen from the diagrams, a new grade 10 role which is being created here to cover the broad financial hardship brief that we're proposing, which includes the work on food. In terms of engagement with partners, as I said before, I think it's, the conversation we need to be having with partners and with members of the Food Board and with Sustain and others is about the work. And that conversation is one that we're having at the moment. As I say, there have been a number of conversations with the chair of the Food Board, and those will continue over the summer. And I'm afraid I don't know obviously I can't speak for what conversations she has had, but the conversation I think that it's right to have with the Food Board and with other stakeholders is about the priorities and the work. And of course, if we end up after those conversations with a slightly different view about the priorities between the Mayor's priorities and what we need to do across the system, we will of course reflect on what that means for our resourcing.
I think one of the issues here is around timing and the fact that from what I've seen, the proposal is that all the feedback needs to be back by the 21st of August. And as I've said, that at least one of your key partners doesn't even appreciate that, or doesn't feel that they've even been consulted yet. Do you not think you're putting the cart before the horse here? Do you not think you should have perhaps had the conversation with partners before you decided what you were going to do, and then perhaps from a more informed position put forward proposals?
It's a very fair question, and we have obviously considered and thought about this. I suppose we had two things in mind here which have led to this timing. One is the urgency of the work. So we know from the work on the recovery programme that the work around financial hardship and the robust safety net mission is absolutely urgent, as Assembly members will appreciate. There are many families across London who are struggling as a direct result of the pandemic, and we want to make sure that we can make a contribution to the work around that as quickly as we can. And we don't currently have the right resources and sufficient resources to do that. So there is some urgency in resolving that. And it's difficult to disentangle these two things within the same team. We also wanted to, we are very conscious of the position of the team here, and we thought the right thing to do was for us to start the consultation with the team and make sure that we were therefore having a really open and transparent conversation with the team, rather than being in a situation where we were having conversations with external partners which had potential implications for people's roles without being able to have that kind of formal and open conversation with the team. So we're trying to strike that balance here. We will, of course, if we need to, look at the timelines to make sure that we've got the time to have all these conversations. And if we need to, we can absolutely extend the consultation period. And I know that there were already some individuals in the team who've asked for more time, and that's absolutely fine. So we will do what we need to adjust the timeline to make sure that all the conversations can happen, and to make sure that we have had all those discussions with partners before we make the final decisions. But yeah, we're trying to strike the right balance to make sure that, let's say, we've been trying not to put the team in a difficult position, because obviously having conversations with external partners before we've started a process of talking to the team is difficult, as I'm sure members will understand.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Assembly Member Russell.
Much of what I was going to be saying has been already said by Assembly Member Ahmed and Prince. But you were just talking about, we're having a conversation, and but on the 20th of July, which is just a couple of days ago, that conversation wasn't happening because Assembly members were written to by Sustain with setting out all their concerns. And I just think the key thing that we need to be thinking about is making sure that we're not, the food agenda is much broader than food insecurity. So it's really important. The food insecurity work is absolutely crucial and really particularly so in the context of the pandemic. But there are other pieces to the food agenda which are to do with the resilience of this city and cut across to all sorts of different bits of the Mayor's work that need to be not forgotten. So I'm just adding my voice really here.
No, and I mean, just to say, I absolutely agree with that point, that we absolutely, there is no intention to narrow our work down to just food insecurity. And indeed, as I said earlier, we're trying to take as holistic a view of food insecurity itself as we can, and the work that the team are already doing reflects that. And as I said, just to repeat, at the moment, there have been a number of conversations with the chair of the food board, which is obviously the right and appropriate place to start with these discussions, but they will carry on through the summer.
Okay, so members, I'm picking up that there are serious concerns here about these proposed changes to the food team. So we're asked to respond. So I'm thinking that our response is that the committee is not convinced by the reorganisation around the food team, and that we would like this to be reconsidered. Now, whether the consultation can be paused, but whether this could be reconsidered to pick up the concerns that we have raised today and from partners. Does that sum it up?
Yeah.
Assembly
I
Member
just want to say,
Desai.
Chair, that apart from sustain, the trade union Unison have also got concerns, and I also understand from the email that they sent to me, and I'm sure other members received it, that they got concerns about other areas as well, related to the whole sort of communities and social policy team.
So this whole team, so there's some wider issues you're aware the unions are aware of. Okay, that hadn't come out in our discussion. Assembly Member Ahmed?
Chair, I wonder if we could word it as actually broadening the consultation, because it's clear that key partners have been missed out and that other facets of this need to be taken into account. Assembly Member Desai has just spoken about the trade unions and about Unison's particular work on this issue, and it just seems as if the consultation itself needs to be broader.
I'm thinking we're saying that we're very concerned about this. I don't know whether Mary wants to comment whether the consultation can be paused, or whether we're asking you actually to stop it and rethink this because we're not convinced this structure is going to deliver.
I'd like to be able to talk to Sarah about what you have all said, and obviously I'm not going to do that live with Sarah now. I think we've heard that the consultation is underway. If people have been missed from the consultation, we absolutely must broaden that, if that is right. I think Sarah said that the consultation isn't going to close until sometime in August, and in fact offered possibly to extend it. I think my preference, Chair, would be that we keep going with this consultation rather than pause it and stop, because that's also unsettling for everybody as well, as we know from elsewhere. But we've got several oversight meetings in September. I think Sarah and I should come back possibly to the first meeting of oversight in September and talk this through more, having taken on board today the comments that you have made.
But we're clearly expressing some
I'm
serious concerns.
And I hear that, absolutely hear that.
Assembly Member Ahmed.
Chair and Sarah or Mary, can we just be very clear about when the consultation date closes, please? Because I've had a couple of dates mentioned. I've got the 2nd of August here, which is next week, and I think Assembly Member Prince said the 21st.
Sarah will need to answer that question.
So the staff consultation is currently due to end on the 2nd of August, but as I said, there have already been discussions with some members of the team about extending that deadline. And as I said earlier, we are obviously also in parallel needing to have some discussions with stakeholders about the wider food work, and those are ongoing. So, depending on how quickly some of those conversations can be got into diaries, we will of course extend timelines as we need to. And just to say that I was going to make exactly the same suggestion as Mary, which is that I think we do need to carry on with this consultation, because these are exactly the conversations that we need to be having to make sure we get these proposals right. And I wouldn't want to pause those consultations, but I think very happy to come back to the meeting in early September and update Assembly members on the thinking as a result of all those consultations.
Are you able to extend the consultation maybe to the end of August to allow for all of these concerns and to extend the consultation to key partners?
So just to be clear, I think there are two things here. There's the formal consultation with staff, and then there's a wider discussion with partners about the work. Now those two things are obviously connected, but they are slightly separate processes. So we are already having conversations with the affected staff members about the timeline for consultation, and we'll absolutely extend that timeline if that's what they want. I think we then need to, there is then a period where we have to reflect on all those consultation responses and, if need be, revise the proposals and come back with a final set of proposals. In this case, we can't do that until some of those wider conversations have also concluded. And I think the early September oversight meeting feels like a reasonable time frame for all that to be done. But I just wanted to make the point that there's a sort of specific question about the staff consultation, which is obviously done through quite formal HR processes, and where we're already having discussions with some people about that deadline. And then there are these wider conversations about the broader food work.
And that can be extended, you're saying, if staff want that, which is what we've heard. Assembly Member Russell.
Yes, I've just got one or two sort of these broader points. Looking at the rationale for the proposals, it seems that the papers explain the rationale for adding resource or having extra high-grade staff, but they don't explain the rationale for removing resource or senior staffing from some areas. So it would be really helpful to kind of just address that when you come back to the committee. And also the structures of the teams in communities and social policy. There's a structure which seems to now have almost entirely even numbered grades, 6, 8, 10 and 12. And there are either 2 or 4 grades between adjacent roles. Now, my question on that is, does this create a structure where it's easy for people to move between roles and develop talent while also retaining institutional knowledge? And then the other point that I wanted to raise was on the equality, diversity and inclusion team, where it looks as if the roles related to that team are all being moved to lower grades. And I just was concerned that that shouldn't lead to a de-skilling of that team, and also whether that might have a sort of bad impact on morale in that team. So those were the 3 points.
Pick that up, Sarah, now. Some of you may want to
very happy
to.
So absolutely happy to provide some additional information on the thinking behind some of the grading as has been requested when we come back in September. On the equality, diversity and inclusion bit of the team, and on your question about the gaps between grades. So it's quite common in structures within teams in the organisation to have these sort of 2 grade jumps, and we see people moving between roles that are 2 grades apart on a regular basis. So I'm not concerned that by changing this grade structure that we'll be limiting people's progression within the team. And of course we also encourage people to progress across the organisation. Part of the thinking here is, in terms of changing some of these grades, is around creating consistency actually across the unit. So there are some concerns from staff at the moment that there is inconsistency of grading in different parts of this unit, and so that's one of the considerations that the team have been working through in putting forward these proposals. But again, this should absolutely not be taken as any sort of judgment either on the individuals in the team at the moment or on the importance of the work. And indeed, on the equality, diversity and inclusion side, these proposals would add additional capacity to that team to reflect the increasing emphasis on these issues, both across the recovery programme and from the Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, Assembly Member Ahmed.
Sorry to labour the point, but could we just be very clear on this? So does this mean that both consultations will be extended?
Sounded to me like the staff one, if the staff request it, will be. And then the other one, there isn't a deadline, it's a wider conversation. Is that right?
That's correct.
And when will the wider conversation end?
Well, I mean, I suppose it will end when we think we've got to a settled view on priorities for that wider programme, and then made sure that we've got the right resourcing plans across the organisation to support it.
Right. The only reason that I'm asking this is because we're just about to go into a summer period where there are not going to be, as you know, people are going to hopefully be on holiday and doing nice things. What I don't want is that we've just discussed the issue of key partners and people who have not been involved in the conversation. They're suddenly, they're approached and they're asked for a response within a couple of days or whatever, and there isn't anybody there to do that. And that if we are meeting, I think, Chair, it's the first week of September, our first
We've got several meetings throughout September. Thursday the 9th.
Are we going to be able to have information by the 9th if this is on the agenda on the 9th?
I think I will need to go away and talk to the team. Obviously, we're not going to, if people are away, they're away, and we will need to make sure we can talk to the right people. But let me take that away, and we'll come back. We'll come back with a proposal about which of those meetings in September it would make most sense to pick this up at.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Assembly Member Sahota.
Chair, I think, listening to this, it seems very important that we do this very properly, that we aren't determined just by the meeting of September, right? The process has to be right. So I hope that the committee makes it clear that we expect the proper consultation to be taking place and they have enough time. So if it doesn't make it to the September, it's going to make it to October, right? Okay?
But we have 3 meetings in September, though we have other big scrutiny business for those, but we can put this at the end of it. So we have 3 opportunities in that month alone. So,
thank you.
Yeah, okay, so we've made our comments. Are people happy with that, plus the additional ones we've made? Davina, you've got a note of it? Lovely, brilliant, thank you very much. I think the rest of the agenda should be more straightforward. Item 9, this is the Education and Youth Team, proposed changes. Have we got any questions on this, members? Assembly Member Hall.
I'll be really brief. Mary, why does the new structure require 3 dedicated communications officers?
Could I ask Sarah to answer that question?
Yep.
Yes, very happy to. So I think this, sorry, I'm just going to get the structure chart up in front of me to make sure I'm referring to the same. So, I mean, it's important to emphasise that this is a team that's working on partnership and communication and engagement. And crucially, it's a team which does a huge amount of work with young people and engaging with young people. And they provide that function for the wider organisation as well. So it may be that we need to look at the titles that are there to make that clear. But this is, these are not communication officers in the sense of press officers. They're communications and engagement officers in the sense of working in partnership with others and engaging with young people.
Okay, Mary, are you comfortable that nearly 150k a year is spent on public relations?
I'm comfortable with the explanation that Sarah's given for the purposes of those posts.
Okay. I would just suggest, wouldn't it be better to have a pool of communications that departments could draw from?
I think so. I can see exactly why you're saying that. I think the word communications is a very broad word. And isn't helpful in defining probably some of sort of the specifics of these particular jobs and the specifics of the partners that they work with. That would be my answer, but Sarah may want to add to that.
I think that's right, and these are very specific roles that will be supporting our strategic convening and leadership role around these issues, and as I say, a very particular set of expertise around engaging young Londoners, where the team already do fantastic work. And for example, there's some really brilliant work going on at the moment with colleagues in this team in supporting young people to engage with the question around vaccine take-up, which is, as colleagues will understand, a high priority at the moment.
Okay, well, I hear what you say. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands, so are members quite happy to just effectively note the consultation? We haven't really got any specific issues. You've obviously heard what Assembly Member Hall has raised. Is that noted? Okay, let's move on to item 10, which is the GLA Team London and Sport Unit proposed changes. Sarah's the lead officer again. Have we got any questions on this, members? Assembly Member Hall.
Quick one. What will be shelved in order to pay for the extra 110,000? Anybody?
I can come back on that if you would like. So the reason that there is additional cost here is because the way the work of this team has shifted. We need more senior roles in order to play the sort of the strategic and strategic roles that we need to work with partners and to deliver what is a very complex and important piece of work, working with many partners. So this team is moving away from a more traditional sort of delivery model into a more strategic role as a result of the work that we're doing around recovery. So that's what's driving the cost. We do think we can find that from within the budgets that are currently allocated to this work. So there will not be any programmes that are stopped as a result of this. We think we can find some savings, and we think that that's the right thing to do. We think that we will add most value to the agendas which this team is promoting by having the right team with the right level of seniority, and we think that's the right trade-off.
Okay, I mean, all right, then what savings, from what area are the savings coming?
So we will obviously have to look, if these proposals go ahead as planned, we will obviously look at this in the budget process, but our expectation is that there will be a small movement of budget from programme activity in these areas towards staffing to cover the additional costs.
Well, perhaps you could write to the committee and tell us where you're saving the money in order to pay the extra money.
Very happy to do that.
Thank you.
So with that additional information we've asked for, can we note that I'm not seeing any other hands, that
Agreed.
members are content with that? Thank you. Item 11, the GLA Regeneration Team proposed changes, and Lucinda Turner's here, Assistant Director Planning, along with Mary on this to answer any questions. Thank you for your time this morning. Members, do we have any questions on this? Assembly Member Best, Fortune, Assembly Member Best.
Chair, morning Lucinda. Reading through the proposed changes, it comes across to me, forgive me, a little bit like moving the deck chairs, that it's a maze of changes, and I can't help but think there's people at the end of these that are, you know, coming back to terms with coming back to work, different work schedules, moving to the Crystal, and now there's a whole load of new teams being proposed. And I'm struggling through reading through to see the real benefit for Londoners here, and I think that is exemplified no more than looking at the post for deletion and the post for creation, where you've got a post for deletion of a senior programme manager at grade 12 and the creation of a senior programme manager at grade 12. It seems a little bit like we're jangling new teams, and I just wonder how is this Londoners really going to see the benefit of these changes?
Yeah, so this, in some of the areas, this is a kind of step one. So what this will be leading to is a co-design process for a spatial development kind of team. And we think there are huge benefits of bringing that together with people in the planning team currently who are working on growth strategies and planning kind of particular places in London. It will also be allied with a look at the TfL growth and master planning team, who look at planning places from a transport perspective. And from that, we actually think, A, it will really streamline activities and the interface with boroughs and Londoners, because at the moment, if we are involved in a particular place, do they go to people in the regeneration area teams? Do they go to the person in the growth strategies team? Or do they go to the kind of TfL representative? So we think there will be significant benefits from bringing those together. There is also an element, so you talked about the deletion of the grade 12 post and the creation of another grade 12 post. I mean, it looks strange on paper, that's kind of how we have to do it, but in essence, that programme manager post, senior programme manager post, will be able to lead and drive activity across the Good Growth Directorate on things like the central activities zone work linked to London's recovery, which draws on kind of units and teams from right across Good Growth. We think there will be benefits in terms of a joined up approach from bringing that together. And then we also think there are synergies from the move of the people in regeneration currently who work on skills and links with further education institutions from being kind of joined with the skills and employment unit and the people again who work on that. And some of the benefits for Londoners, I mean, at the moment, some of the FE institutions have a relationship with a person in the skills and employment team and a relationship with somebody in the kind of regeneration team. So we think there will be benefits for those who work with us and who we kind of partnership with. But also in terms of the staff, I absolutely take the point. Change is always unsettling, and we've all had a pretty tough year with COVID and all the changes that we're coping with. We will be working really closely with the teams involved. We've already been talking to them about these proposals. We will be providing assistance kind of should they need it. But actually the conversations so far that we've had are, obviously it's always subject to kind of the detail and devil is always in the detail, but the conversations we've had so far have actually been positive from the teams involved, and they do perceive that there are potential benefits that could come from this, from bringing together just that range of activity that we do in particular places to plan them, to help regenerate them and to fund particular projects kind of that's aligned with that.
And just one final question. I think what I struggled from reading the report to gather was what I think you just said there, which I think everybody wants to see is more like a one-stop shop from the planning and regeneration team, which is very difficult to navigate and work out who you need to talk to. So is that the key here? Is this we're going to see more of a one-stop shop where you only need to speak to one person?
That is certainly the aim, but that would come, the paper references the subsequent phase, subject to this and the consultation and this going through. There would then be a co-design phase with the regeneration people who are coming into planning, with the growth strategies team, which is already in planning, and with the growth and master planning team in TfL to aim to do exactly that. So we would develop from that with those people, but also with the partners we work with. There would be a work stream specifically focused on external engagement, external partners to get their view, but that is absolutely the aim.
Thank you.
Fortune.
Thank you, Chair. A bit of a parochial question for me, actually. It's about the Crystal Palace Sports Centre in Bromley. I see that's moving over to the Housing and Land Directorate, set out at 4.7. Could you just give me some reassurance that's not going to be lost and perhaps write to me and just give me an update? It would be really good to know and useful to know what's going on with that.
Of course, it's not a currently funded post, so it would be subject to that funding, but yes, we can follow up with you on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've had a discussion, but I'm not hearing any particular concerns, so can we note this consultation from the Chief Officer? Lovely.
Noted.
Thank you. Right, item 12. Now, we had a little discussion there. This is the London Assembly Work Programme. I'd had some concerns raised by Assemblymember Duval, just that not all of the group leads on committees had signed off the final work programme. So, unless I have any questions from members, I'm minded that we ratify the topic and scopes of projects in the work programme from May to August, as attached in Appendix 1, and then note the currently proposed draft work programme for the London Assembly's committees and panels for September 2021 to April 2022, and request a final programme to come to one of the September oversight committees. Is that agreed with members? Lovely, thank you. Item 13, the GLA Oversight Committee work programme. We've got a busy work programme, not just all these committee restructurings, we've got a lot of scrutiny. So can we note the work programme for 2021-22? And I've got more here, I'm afraid. At our meeting of the 25th of May 2021, we established the Election Review Working Group. This is meeting on the 29th of July 2021 for the first time. In order for the working group to complete its investigation, can I ask the committee additionally to agree that authority be delegated to me as chair of the GLA Oversight Committee in consultation with the deputy chairman and party group lead members and the chair of the Election Review Working Group to agree any output of that working group? Thank you very much. The next meeting of our committee is going to be on Thursday the 9th of September at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I've got no other business. Thank you members very much indeed and enjoy the summer break.
Chair, thank you very much.